All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us back on the Business Podcast. This is your host, Jacob Rupp, and I am thrilled to bring you, for the very first time, a guest here on the podcast. His name is Rabbi Avigdor Goldberger. He is the CEO of the Minneapolis Kollel and a strategist in the realm of business and marketing. And I'm thrilled to have him on. So thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here. This is fun.
Yeah,
this
great.
is a lot of fun.
So before we get started, tell us a little bit about where you come from and how you wound up at your current position.
Oh gosh, I grew up in a place where we believed that the South won the Civil War.
I don't know if you're joking right now.
Well, Atlanta.
Okay.
Most people don't realize that we've got our own Mount Rushmore down there. It's got
Jefferson Davis,
Stonewall Jackson, and Robert E. Lee.
So good.
I'm very proud to say that I know the name of Robert E. Lee's horse,
Traveler. I'm really glad that you're okay.
Anyways,
yes,
but that doesn't really define me. No, I grew up in Atlanta, where my father and my father-in-law were both part of the Kollel there. Actually, when I got engaged, somebody behind me in the synagogue, when they announced this, says that's practically incest. Two Kollel families, intermarrying, as it were. But the Kollel thing's in my blood. I love living, in wonderful communities. I went to some big yeshivas in Baltimore and Philadelphia and Lakewood and Israel and did all that. And then wanted to go to a smaller Jewish community, take my Kollel background and really go and bring wisdom to the world. I mean, that's the dream.
So before we jump into the business component of this, what role do you feel, and it's in the institution of the Kollel in 2020, there was a I don't think that anyone can undervalue the importance of Jewish engagement, how we engage people, but what is the role of the Kollel in your mind for a community, for a city? How does it change?
Great question. If you want to change the culture of any place, if you want to change the culture, you've got to bring that culture that you're missing into a place. The one thing that people in general are missing today the most, I find, is wisdom. We have knowledge, we have information. We don't have wisdom. We don't know how to put it together. We're confused. We don't have clarity about things. Talk about values. Everybody has values. I don't think the problem is defining what values are. It's the hierarchy of values and what do you do when values conflict. That requires wisdom, not knowledge.
Can you distinguish, can you define the two terms?
Yeah, I once heard a great line from somebody. He says, the stupidest person in the world is a smart person who's wrong.
Wow, that's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah.
The opposite of wisdom is not ignorance, it's foolishness. What's the difference between foolishness and ignorance?
Ignorance is you don't know, and foolishness is you're not doing anything about it?
Well, ignorance is you don't know, and foolishness is you know the wrong things.
Interesting. Okay.
When someone becomes foolish, the difference between a wise person and a foolish one is the wise person continues learning, and the foolish person stops. When you stop learning, so you're basically making all your decisions in life based on premises that you held 10, 20 years ago, and those haven't changed at all as you've grown and matured and the world's changed around you, but you're still operating based on the axioms that you had when you were back in school, because honestly, that was the last time you ever learned. That was the last time you ever were a student. So most people, they finish school and they're done studying. So the rest of their life, they're making decisions based on the axioms that they had when they were in school. That's what I mean when I say foolishness versus wisdom. The wise person is somebody who continues learning. And what Kollels do is bring a culture of learning. And obviously in Judaism, we're blessed with it. In my mind, the world's greatest repository of wisdom that exists. And if we can create a culture of learning, of serious learning, of lifelong students who just want to learn and grow and spread wisdom to the world, we'll all be better off for it.
So it's interesting. What role do you see the Kollel playing in, let's say, the life of an executive, someone that is not a rabbi or is involved in Jewish communal work, but just the average guy? How would I, as a business owner, benefit from going to the Kollel?
I mean, just this morning. I study every morning with Mr. John Garmazian, who's,
I hope you asked if it's okay if you can name drop on the podcast.
Sorry. Anyways, we're studying this morning. He runs the Mall of America, just in case you want to know. There's name dropping right there.
There's another one.
So we're talking, and we study every morning, like in-depth study. And we were talking this morning about this exact idea, and he said, people don't have to think in life. Like, you don't. Even if you're running a company, you got to make decisions. You're not really critically thinking relative to the real wisdom and thinking that's out there for someone to do. And when we don't think, our minds become stale. We become foggy. Like, I myself, like, I know if I'm out of learning for a little bit and I want to get back into it, my mind becomes foggy and stale, and I can't critically think. I don't know how to properly put things together. A great thought that just kind of describes this. Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, who was a great Jewish thinker, lived in the 1700s. He writes a book that talks about the rules of logic. The rules of logic. Like, what are actually what do we think about the rules of logic, right? And in his introduction to the book, he says the following. He says, there's a massive difference between a jungle and a beautifully manicured lawn or garden, right? A jungle has all sorts of plants and whatever, but it's not pleasing because it's just all mixed up, and you can't really appreciate what's there because everything's just kind of jumbled together, and it's a jungle. Whereas a beautifully manicured garden, you've got the roses here, you got the hedges here, and everything's perfectly laid out with a perfect aesthetic, and you appreciate every single thing that's there. And that's what we need the most work on. Our minds are jungles. We're full of information. We're full of bits of stuff. We live in the information age, right? We have tons of information, but it's a jungle. Like, our minds are literally just full of stuff and information, and we don't know how to appreciate it. We don't know how to properly put it into perspective. And it's only through rigorous thought and study that a person learns how to create a file system in their own mind, where, like, when I take in information, I know how to arrange it with everything else that I already know. It's a mind-blowing thought that, yeah.
Well, the interesting question on that would be, so you essentially look at, or the way that you're explaining this is essentially that a person who does not have an ongoing system of refining their thinking is not getting the most out of what they could be bringing to the table.
Well, absolutely.
That's what you're saying?
Right. I mean, let's say you find out a new piece of information. Everybody out there has an agenda with what they're publishing, right? So let's say I'm in the real estate industry, or let's say I'm a stock market guy, or, finance guy, and I see a piece of information about, I don't know, the markets or some sector of the market, right? Do I immediately know what to do with that information? Or is it like, most often we don't really know how to file it away or how to rate it relative to anything else, and I'm either subject to the author and how much weight or interest he's putting on that, which is a huge fallacy. I mean, it's very easy to take a small sample of something and,
Someone once quoted as an authoritative source to me the internet. Yeah. I wanted them to investigate
exactly.
Jordan Peterson, and
right.
He said, well, the internet says he's something or other. I'm like,
right.
Who's the internet?
Right. So if we don't have a really worked out system of thought where we know where to file information away, how are we supposed to, with any sense of wisdom, really, process information that we get? And I mean, ask ourselves: do we have a system of information in our heads?
Well, one of the big challenges that I would anticipate many people have is that with all of the new developments that come out in terms of how to learn and how to be creative, I mean that's in and of itself is a very big field today. What is unique about the Jewish system per se, in the fact that it's been practiced over thousands of years, whereby I might want to opt into that system versus trying, I don't know, Jim Quick has a new system on how to read faster, for example. Right?
I'm not an expert in every learning system that exists in the world, but I can honestly say that if anybody were to get a real feel for the yeshiva experience, the authentic, you're talking about guys that sit and study with a partner for 10, 12, 15 hours a day, and they're discussing the same exact subject for the entire day, and they're not getting bored of it. That process develops such a deep and organized system of thought that's not something you can ever develop like this, and there's something very unique to that process.
So that's it. The fact that the system exists, let's say for someone that is not going to sit in yeshiva, or someone that's not for the women and the general audience out there, say someone who's not Jewish, right? How can there be a benefit to this contribution to world thought?
So twofold. Number one is everybody can access it to the degree that they can. I mean, it's open to all, and anybody's open to more wisdom. But secondly, even if you're not the one developing the wisdom that's been developed by this process is wisdom as opposed to knowledge and information that hasn't
because it's been so well discussed.
Correct. Right. And the ethics that come out of this system are so developed and so thought out and so worked out that it's really it's different level stuff. It really is different level stuff.
So to what extent, let's say a person's starting a business or a person's currently in a business, to what extent or what are some of the signs or rules that they could deploy to think through something properly? Meaning, one of the points that I think can't be emphasized enough is that something that you've thought about a lot is going to be intrinsically more reliable than something that just sort of comes to you.
Correct.
So, we're going to ask a question about intuition and creativity in a second, but the first approach would be, how much time or how do I sit and think through an idea? Let's say I'm trying to figure out if I want to build some new component of my business, or I want to add something into, I do a lot of coaching. So if I want to bring in a new methodology to my coaching, how much and how do I think through that new piece of information?
There's a great statement in Jewish thought that basically goes, if anybody wants to really analyze and figure something out and understand it completely, there's 7 questions he's got to ask. It's essentially the who, what, when, where, why, how, when, right? But there's a process to that. And the process basically goes like, okay, what's the statement there's a statement. I got a statement in front of me. Now, is it true or false? How do I figure out if it's true or false? How does it relate to other things? Every single fact in life relates to every other fact in life in one of probably 6 or 7 ways. It's either a general principle and a specific example of that principle. It's either a thing and its opposite. It's either the same thing. It's either a corollary of it, cause and effect. When you get into a systematic way of thinking, and it really doesn't matter what the topic is that you're discussing, but if you actually get into, the way they call it the yeshiva system of thinking, where I hear it's popular in South Korea, by the way. When you get into this way of thinking, you're really systematically thinking about something as opposed to just, what does my gut tell me?
That's fascinating. So when a person hears a new thought or a person feels a new thought, so to speak, if they think that it's actually new, means they haven't thought through it well enough.
Oh, nothing's new.
Right.
This is a fascinating thing, by the way. And I remember having a conversation with somebody in the elections of 2012. Okay? And this guy was a finance guy, finance major, bright guy. And he tells me, he says, I think Obama's better for the economy than Mitt Romney. I said, okay, why? So he gives me this whole analysis. I said, look, I don't know half as much of finance as you do. I mean, maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong. But let me ask you one question. Is there anybody who's as smart as you, that knows as much about finance as you do, that thinks Romney's better for the economy? So he was honest. He said, yeah, of course. So I said, how do you know you're right?
What do you say?
Nothing. And that's a fallacy we all have, by the way, and we'll talk about this in creativity, but we all think our thoughts are our own ideas. It's not true. We're food processors, right? I mean, we take in whatever we take in, we chew it up, and we spit it out. And if we don't have a system, a filter built into our brains that is able to filter out, okay, here's my axioms that I'm already predicating my life on. Everything I think about is filtered through this. This new piece of information, how should I process that? Is that something I should add to my basic axioms? Is it contradiction to them? Then I'll reject it. If it fits with my axioms on life, I'll add to it and I'll create another, little part of my brain. If I'm not doing that, the scary part is that every piece of information that we hear actually impacts our thinking. So now our own ideas, which we think are our own ideas, are really just a product of everything we've ever seen and heard. And we don't even know why
we don't know why we
think anymore.
Right.
Right. Like so anytime you see something, it impacts the way you think. And unless you have a system of thought already, which you can say, well, and again, it's not as if you consciously do this. Once you've developed a system, it happens by itself. It works on its own. But okay, I don't agree with that. That doesn't fit with my system of thought. So then it actually doesn't impact my thinking.
So what I'm hearing is that it's very important, like from the person like would analyze like a new business opportunity, for example, if they don't have their core principles worked out, or their core audience worked out, or their core offering worked
Correct.
out,
Absolutely.
then yeah, we could offer that, but then you're like, well, but we don't have the infrastructure to offer something like that. We don't have a tested market, and suddenly you've walked into a very dangerous place, as let's say as a business owner, because you're operating in an area of tremendous you don't know.
Let me give you a concrete example with the work that I do, which is adult education, right? That's what we're talking about. So often someone will come with a great idea for a program. Oh, this is an awesome idea for a program. And my response usually is, well, who are you trying to target and why? Like, who are the people that you want to help learn? What do you think they want to learn? And then figure out the program based on that. Like, if you're just going to come in, oh, that's a great idea, we got to implement that.
100%.
Well, does that fit with what you're trying to do or not?
Perfect. You know? And I think that for a lot of people is where just people starting new businesses, they get lost in a lot of ways, is because they're so overwhelmed with a million different possibilities, and you don't start with the basic question of, well, what do you want to do, and for whom do you want to do it?
You know what I love seeing on social media? People do this all the time with, like, they'll show like an ad for Apple, right? Like, you know, and they'll analyze like Apple's marketing strategy, right? And they're like, you do this, you'll create your company. It's like, you're not Apple. Just because Apple's successful with doing what Apple does, it's not going to work for you.
Right.
The reason why big marketing campaigns work for big companies is because they're big and all over the place.
Yes.
If you're a small company that's starting out, word of mouth and direct marketing is going to be a heck of a lot more effective than putting out flyers.
It's so funny. I literally had this conversation with a client of mine because he started working with a big coaching company, and they were doing a tremendous volume of clients, and their monthly revenue was tremendous. And then he went on his own for a little bit, and was getting upset and discouraged because, you know, it's like, well, these guys are making $100,000 a month. You know, what's going on with me? And I said, well, you have to realize, like, for that $100,000 a month, you have no idea how much went into paying the copywriter for the ad, putting into the Facebook ad spend so that you could figure out the algorithm and get the strategy that works. And so exactly right. It's like, if you're going to go on your own, you have to not look at the big guys. And again, there's like, I get upset about this because, you know, there are so many people out there in the information space who have made a ton of money selling how to make money. And now they're able to, the reason why they're able to make so much money is because they're able to become ever present, which is a strategy. But for the person that does not have that initial investment of, again, you know, everyone who's really good at stuff can charge a lot of money. So internet marketers are no different. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and the problem is that we get excited by ideas. We hear a good idea, and it may be a good idea for a specific scenario, a specific time and place. And if you have a system of thought in your mind, you have a filtration system, so you're able to say, well, this is my strategy. This is how I'm going to be successful. And then you can immediately say, well, does this fit with my strategy? Does it enhance my strategy? Does it not? And immediately you'll think about that if that's the way you're conditioned to think. But if you're the jungle, if you're the guy whose head is a jungle, if you're the guy who anytime you hear a good idea, it's like on a whim, let's go do it. Well, that is the epitome of foolishness. The distinction between wisdom and foolishness, like we're talking about, is this: do you have a system in your head? Are your thoughts arranged? Do you know what your basic strategy in life is, or in business, or you know? And then what are the corollaries of that, and what are the details, and what's a principle and what's a detail? You know, if you have that strategy, then you'll hear an idea, you'll know how to apply it, you'll know how not to apply it.
It's so much more than a business concept. I think it's a life concept, because so often we get caught up in comparisons, and the comparisons are good until you realize that maybe the situation is completely different. I remember asking people when I was starting my coaching business, I would look around at other coaches and I would say, you know, like, wow, how do you take all the money you earn and reinvest it back into your bit, whatever it was. And I'd always find there was a common theme, which was someone or something was taking care of paying for the rest of their life. You know what I'm saying? So it's like the person that was the coach, I'm like, oh, that's awesome. So like, how do you manage that versus and it's like, well, actually my spouse is the breadwinner and I'm doing this on my own and I've been doing it for 10 years. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, so that doesn't apply right away. So it's like being able to have the ability to sort of know, again, when you're saying axioms, in a business sense, it's like, who am I serving and what am I serving them?
Right.
But in your own life, it's like, who am I? What are my requirements and situations? The person that's able to just pack up and, go travel over the weekend is someone that might not have a family per se or young children at home. Right. I had Lori Platnick on.
Now you're name dropping.
No, I'm name dropping. I'm not yet. Yeah, but I had her on. And so, she's someone who has made such a significant impact in the Jewish world on an international level, and she was very candid about the fact that she was doing this after raising children for 2+ decades, and that she could never do this when she was, and so that comparison standard whereby a young mom with kids might be like, well, why can't I go out and change the world because someone's screaming or dad has the same situation? It's like, well, you just have to be clear before you compare with your exact situation in life.
So yeah, I mean, absolutely. I'm gonna say something. You like sound bites, right?
Yeah,
sound bites are great for these things, right?
I love sound bites.
Self-help books are a tremendous source of foolishness.
Ooh, okay.
There's your sound bite. Now let me explain what I'm talking about. Self-help books give a prescription, right? They're prescriptive. Here's what you need to do. As with any prescription, right? It's great for some circumstances, and it can kill somebody else.
Yes.
Right? And the problem, I think, in the absence of real wisdom, I think people turn to self-help books. And people say, well, I'm clueless. I don't know what I'm doing. I need to figure out my life. I need to figure out a way to go. And they pick up a self-help book. And somebody wrote that book based on their experiences, which it's a great book based on their experiences. And like you just said, everybody's life circumstances are different. So you're going to pick up the book and it's going to say, okay, step 1, do this. Step 2, do... And you're going to try to do that and you're going to utterly fail. Because that book wasn't written for you.
Or worse, the consequences of... you might not fail in that particular... I'm sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
So my point is like this. The only... The wisdom's out there, and the difference between, again, wisdom can't be prescriptive.
Wisdom cannot be prescriptive.
Correct. Wisdom has to be, I'm always learning. I have my core principles. I know how I see the world. I know what my goals are. And every book that I read and everything that I pick up enhances that. Some things are going to fit. Some things aren't going to fit. And I'm going to have to be that filter that takes, the information that enhances. Now, I have to keep on learning. Books are great. We love books, right? But books aren't meant to be prescriptive. Books are meant to be informative, right? So you can take that information and then build your own view, your own way of thinking, your own goals. And I think that's the problem, is that, so sometimes you'll find people come into the Kollel and they'll learn things that seemingly have nothing to do with their lives. People are like, what does this have to do with my life? How is this helping me? Give me a book that gives me a prescription. I want to know A, B, C. And in my mind, that's the epitome of foolishness. You want a book that wasn't written for you, that's going to give you instructions, and you're going to follow that prescription, you're going to fail. Because it's not written for you, and you don't know how to incorporate that into your life. Better learn how to organize your thoughts. Learn how to organize the way you view information. Once you gain that critical life skill of being able to organize information in your head, then you could read anything and find value in it. The Talmud says the wise person is the one who learns from everybody. Today we only like to learn from experts, right? Why? Because they're smart and they have the wisdom. If you are wise yourself, if you're a student of wisdom, then you can find wisdom in anything, because everything in the world can be a learning experience to you and can inform the way you see things. Your eyes are wide open, and there isn't a single thing that you experience that doesn't enhance your view of life.
It's fascinating. I want to I think encapsulate 3 points that I took that I thought I was hearing you say. The first one is that
I like this. You're organizing.
No, I'm trying to think about it, because I think there's a lot of very practical components here. One component is that, and not to draw, I'm dropping more names. My first interview with Shimon Jacobson, he said that you rarely find in these, he said Freud and Mozart and, 3 other people that are very famous. He says, what are their kids doing? And in most cases, you do not find these people that break the mold so dramatically. We don't know what their kids are doing or if they even have kids.
Right.
But he was saying that in Judaism, so pretty much your success is based on how well your kids picked up the values that you were trying to impose. And so he was saying that, we have to figure out, am I just trying to make a big splash? I mean, that's a fundamental question. Do I want to follow a Freud and make a big splash on the world scene? At which point that usually means working in a cave, working away from other people, not trying to figure out how does this fit into the lifestyle. I think that's one fundamental thing. Another very important. So again, the first question would be that it doesn't just apply to your business, but you also have to have a wisdom for how do I want my life to look as well. You see that same thing in a lot of the experts that we see and people that operate on a lot of times someone that comes from one way of living and then makes a massive transition later in their life. So when they grew up poor and becomes very wealthy or whatever it might be, is that often they don't remain married to the same person. Because in this, and again, from a Jewish perspective, we do put a lot, there's a value to maintaining your marriage if you can. We're great with divorce if it has to happen and everything like that. But it's like you have to pay attention to your spouse also because there's a value there. And so the interesting thing is, I might want to watch a Tony Robbins, for example, and I think he's been married twice, 3 times, whatever it might be. And you have to say, well, somehow he didn't make that transition of bringing along his spouse on his journey. And if that's something you want to do, you have to find someone that was able to build their empire and stay married to the same people. And better than that, try to find like 3 people that did it, because you don't want to wind up, quote, successful like him if that's going to mean sacrificing your kids, your family. The last point that I heard that was so important, and I think that this is crucial to be made by someone that might be someone that is an Orthodox Jew, is that the point of Jewish wisdom, the point of wisdom in general, is not, like you said, to be prescriptive. That very often we think, well, if this man with a beard says this must be true for me all the time. And that's not at all what we're saying. The goal is to figure out how do things fit into your life, because I can just speak from personal experience. A lot of times you take on things and try to become someone because he's the expert and I want to be like him, but then you neglect that there are values and things in your own life that you want to embrace and be a more, you can't just like you're like people in a lot of ways like a rubber band. So it's like you will snap back in a lot of ways to who you are. You don't want to pull yourself too tightly in the process.
I've seen that happen. I've literally seen that happen. I'm very close with a guy. This I'm not going to name him.
Yeah, probably is.
Let's just call him
Stan.
I was going to say Jake, but that's
okay. That's whatever you mean. I was going to. Right. Okay.
I'm trying to think of a name that can be Hebraicized too. Let's say David and David, right?
Okay, great.
So this guy was David, okay, and he just soul on fire, like just caught into the whole thing, and he became David, like overnight, just transformed his life, went to yeshiva, studied the whole bit, and then changed his name. I mean, he's David now and whatever. And then after about 1.5 years of that, just
you see David drinking in a bar somewhere,
right?
Yeah,
David's
not there anymore,
right?
Yeah,
and I still keep up with him and we're talking a lot, and it became so clear to me that David never changed, right? Like, he just adopted a second persona called David that was totally incongruous with David.
Right.
And eventually he just realized, like, wait, who am I? Am I David or am I David? Like, and
then it becomes very obvious. He's like, I'm David.
I'm David, right?
Yeah.
So like, David was this like a character, like an actor, like, and he literally became a character, and he acted as this character for 1.5 years, and it was great. But you can't act as a character your whole life. When the movie's over, like, you go back to being who you are, and the only way to really change is to incorporate whatever your new information, new knowledge is into you. Like, David can change, but if you're just going to leave David the same and like become David, like, that's not going to work.
Well, it's interesting. I feel like that one of the major symptoms of this concept of foolishness, is you're saying, that exists in the world, is that you find all fundamentalisms taking off to a very large extent nowadays. And again, what is a fundamentalist? There's, everyone can say, well, this is for sure bad fundamentalism, like ISIS, or you have other fundamentalisms, like just spiritual practice. I dare I even say like core power yoga, or like the CrossFit world, like, or the mixed martial arts world. Like, you find that we buy in hook, line, and sinker to these various programs, and programs that can create a massive and fanatic following do very well.
Right.
And the question is, like, what is wrong with our society that we are so inclined to buy into these things so much? And I think it's that exact concept that I feel an intrinsic lacking within myself. I have all kinds of problems. I don't think it's also any kind of an irony that there is such a wide amount of this is like my favorite book in the world. One of my, I hate to say that, but this was great. There's an amazing book called.
It's okay. You could have a lot of them.
I have, yeah, one of my most favorite. So he wrote two books. He wrote one about the drug. One was called Chasing the Scream, about the drug use, and one was about the use of antidepressants. Mm-hmm. And his point in the book about antidepressants, I have to find out what the name is, was that people are so quick to diagnose and say, here, just take this pill, when in reality, most people have just terrible lives, and that's why they're depressed. They're not enjoying their job. Right. They have problems at home. They don't have self-confidence. So rather than just giving the pill, he was saying if people could just ask, hey, you look miserable and you should be miserable because these things aren't working for you. He said like you could change the entire world. So I think the point that is can't be stressed enough is that wisdom is to look at your life and say, what am I missing? What are my structures? It's important to me to have work that I enjoy doing. Right. It's important to me to have people that love me, or a sense of a society or a social structure that I feel comfortable in. And if I don't have that, I'm going to be miserable, as opposed to saying, I'm miserable, I don't know why, I'm going to join the CrossFit gym and go there all the time.
Well, I want to take this even to the next level.
Oh, boy.
I know a lot of people. I'm talking to a specific friend of mine who, he tells me, I've got three tracks in my life. There's my personal track, there's my professional track, and then there's my spiritual track. And here's my goal in my personal life, here's my goal in my professional life, here's my goal in my spiritual life. And ultimately, I think what really having a structure for wisdom does, and the ultimate goal, is where it's all streamlined. It's really all one thing. It's not even different tracks. And the problem that a lot of people have, at least from an intellectual standpoint and a knowledge standpoint, is that I have different goals, but they don't fit with each other. And I maybe don't want to admit it readily, but my professional goal doesn't really fit with my personal goal. And my personal goal doesn't really fit with my spiritual goal. And you're fighting yourself. I mean, at the end of the day, you've laid out these different goals, and maybe this guy's your role model as far as professional, if I want to be the Tony Robbins, but in my spiritual life, I want to be that. And in my family life, exactly what you're saying before, well, those goals are contradictory. Mm-hmm. And so what do you think that does to a person internally when their primary goals in life just conflict with each other?
And literally every single time you're successful in one goal, it's at the expense of something else.
Right. You can't be satisfied ever.
Right.
You can't be satisfied with that. So part of the importance of having a structure of wisdom is that you have to figure out, like I said before, what values are more important than other values. Sure, values, I value this, I value that, I value that. Okay, but rank them. A hierarchy. What are the basic building blocks of my life? And I would even say, what's the basic building block of my life? I'm going to quote the Rabbi Luzzatto again. He's got another book of his that just pretty much lays out a pathway for a person's life called Basilas Yesharim. It's the path of the just. And he starts off, his first line, he says, everybody should think about, why they're here and what they should place their goal in life. And he says singular. Their goal. It's a singular term. Their one goal. Because ultimately, we can only successfully have one goal. Now, that one goal can manifest in many, many different places. But if we have more than one core goal, then they're going to come in conflict with each other. So that's one of the huge benefits of having a system of thought is removing conflict, internal conflict, where it's like I'm fighting myself because this part of me wants that and that part of me wants this, and who am I and what am I all about? And
so I think it's funny because at the very beginning and at the very end on the let's call it in the spectrum of business, at the beginning of a business and kind of at the end of the business, there's these you move from a practical how do I grow to the esoteric what do I want to do. So on the beginning it's like, do I want to start a business? What should I start? Why should I start it? What should it look like? Should I get a job? Should I start a business? Should I join, kind of a, like a sales team where I kind of have my own, but I'm part of a bigger system. And at the end, I've built a practice. Do I want to keep working in the practice? Do I want to sell the practice? Do I want to, so at either ends, you run into this very esoteric question of, well, now what? And I think that's exactly the point that a person needs to start by asking themselves is, and again, this is not, we're not just talking theory. Like literally, this is a problem that so many of my clients have, which is it's like, what do I want? And then I go always back to, well, why did you start the business in the first place? Or, just because you thought it would be cool to have this kind of an online business, do you want cash flow right now? Well, then if it's not making a lot of money, so then let's think maybe there's a better way to make money. Is it making money, but you don't feel like you exist, like you're just part of a cog in a machine? Okay, so if self-expression is important in your business, so then maybe the money doesn't matter as much, or like you need to be doing something completely different. So I think that's so fundamental is nailing into my purpose. Right. But then it becomes, and then I guess because we could talk for hours. Last point then would be, how do I build a goal big enough to encapsulate everything?
Ooh, that's a big one. I mean, you talk about your clients. Isn't it ironic? It's always so much easier for somebody else to kind of see the inherent contradictions in ourselves and ourselves.
It's the worst. No, seriously, people people like make fun of me. I'm not going to say who makes fun of me, but the closer the people are to me, they're always saying, "You're such a mess. How do you get paid to help other people out?" But that's exactly the point, is that your own insanity, I don't know if there's like a wisdom thing, but very often it's so hard to see your own insanity, and it's so much easier to see.
Biased, that's
totally.
But I think wouldn't it be great if we actually were able to do that on our own? If we were actually able to sit there and rationally apprise ourselves.
You're telling me I should come to the Kollel. This is where this is going. Well, I see that. That's very good. I like
you
that.
Want to know what the Kollel provides? Right. That's it.
Right.
That's what we provide. We provide people. Now, again, it's not quick and it's not easy. I mean, it requires work and investment and learning how to think. So it's twofold. Number one, if you want to develop that system for yourself, you absolutely can. Number two, if you don't have the time or energy to do it, you can find somebody else who's already developed that system and they can be your consultant or your coach. There you go, right?
Beautiful. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, for anyone that wants more information about Rabbi Goldberger, how do we find you?
Well, you got a website, mnkollel.org.
MN as in Minnesota.
mnkollel.org.
Yes.
I'm on LinkedIn. It's my only social media platform that I do. That's another topic for a different day. I am on LinkedIn. Hit me up there, or on mnkollel.org. This contact is available and readily.
Amazing.
Let's talk to you.
Okay, Syny Radio, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Best of luck.
Thanks, Jake.